What's up, guys? So, we're going to be talking about the last portion of the Civil War, so not to waste any time, let's go ahead and roll through the essential questions real quick. So, what were the major events of the final years of the Civil War from 1863 to 1865? So, the major battles that we'll be talking about, and also at the close of it, the assassination of Abraham Lincoln. What was the intended purpose of this thing called the Emancipation Proclamation, which I touched on already, but now to elaborate on it just a little bit more in this PowerPoint. And also, we're going to explain what the impact of the proclamation on the South's ability to end the war or to win the war was. In 1863, the tide of the war shifted in favor of the North. Why does that happen? What factors lead to that shift? Because prior to that, in the earlier portion, the Confederate States are really winning, especially in that Eastern theater. So we're going to talk about why it is that shift changes. Elaborate upon the importance of the Gettysburg Address. What is the Gettysburg Address and what's its intention and what does it actually end up doing? And then lastly, how was the country different after the end of the Civil War? Or what were the effects of the Civil War on the nation as a whole? But really specifically, we're going to look at the South. So rolling through that, we talked about a battle called Antietam, one that was a very, very bloody battle, the bloodiest single day of combat in the Civil War with a heavy loss of life, about 22,000 people dying in a single day. So we talked about Antietam being declared a victory on the part of the Union. So as a result of that victory, Lincoln is going to issue what's called the Emancipation Proclamation. And there's just a section of the Emancipation there just to elaborate on what it is specifically that the Emancipation does. This is an executive order that is given by the president. That means there's no congressional approval. He just sort of gives it, and it has the weight of law. He uses his war powers to do that. And what that does is it essentially frees or dictates that all slaves within states that are in rebellion, so that's all of the Confederacy down here. All slaves are to be freed in any states that are currently in rebellion. Well, there's actually no weight or no bearing on these states to follow this executive order because technically, according to these states, they're not a part of the United States anymore. So Lincoln doesn't really have any say on what it is can occur or what it is should happen with these slaves that exist within these states, within the Confederate States. And what he is trying to do is get those Confederate states, those states in rebellion, to return to the Union. Because what he doesn't do is say that slavery is ended. The Emancipation does not end slavery. It does not get rid of slavery, and that's not his intention. Because slaves still exist within Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, and Delaware. There's still slaves there. And the reason he gives this is to say, hey, guys, guess what? All right, so still cool with slavery. Slavery's fine. You can keep it. You can have it. And here is an incentive. If you return to the Union, if you come back into the Union, you can keep your slaves. He's saying, come back and you can keep your slaves. That's absolutely fine because Missouri, Kentucky, Maryland, and Delaware actually get to keep theirs up until the passage of the 13th Amendment, which abolishes slavery. He's trying to coerce these states to come back into the Union by issuing the Emancipation Proclamation, trying to get them to return of their own accord, give them the choice to return, essentially. And that just says that all right there. It inspires those Southern slaves to escape, which forced Southern whites to worry about their farms. So people, slaves within the South, hear about the Emancipation, and they see this as their saving grace. Lincoln is considered the great emancipator. There's that picture right there that was drawn shortly thereafter the Emancipation was given, and it shows on the left-hand side just the subjugation of black people within the United States, of slaves within the United States, and then on the right-hand side you see here people over here being whipped. You see an auction block, and then over here you see people voting or being able to pay for their own goods. And Lincoln is seen as the great emancipator. He is seen from this point as the man that wants to abolish slavery. But one impact that the Emancipation Proclamation has that's really not intended, and this is one that's not in the notes, so pay attention. One big impact that the Emancipation Proclamation had was that it makes the war about slavery now. The war is no longer about just preserving the Union. Of course, that's still important, but now the war is about ending slavery as well. And so the Confederate States are seen as 100% pro-slavery. And if you are for the Confederate States, then you are for slavery. And as a result of that, since the war becomes about slavery because of the Emancipation Proclamation, you're going to see Britain and France, specifically Britain, they're going to drop any support that they may have had for the Confederate States because Britain has abolished slavery and they don't want to be seen as a nation that supports another nation that is 100% for slavery. So they're going to lose the Confederate States. They're going to lose any sort of foreign support that they would have relied upon, which they really heavily relied upon. They were kind of just buying their time until Britain would show up and kind of save their skin and help them out. So as a result, Abraham Lincoln making this war about slavery, Britain is going to back out, and the South is no longer going to have that foreign support that they were hoping for. Just a couple of more significant battles, not to go into any real detail with them, but just to let you know that the Confederate States are actually still winning off in the Eastern Theater. Over here in the East, the Battle of Fredericksburg, the Battle of Chancellorsville, they ended up losing Stonewall Jackson, who is a very important and very significant figure within the Confederate States. He ends up dying at Chancellorsville, but even though he does perish, there is still a significant amount of Confederate victories going on within the East. So they're still winning battles, though Grant is gaining ground off in the West. So, talking about why it is they're winning in the East still, why it is that the Confederacy is still having so many victories off in the Eastern Theater, it's just because of that defensive strategy, and it's really mainly because of those better generals, the better coordination that they have on the battlefield. Most of the generals that are fighting for the Union really don't have the experience that these Southern generals have, and again, that's something I've talked about already, but I just want to reiterate these things to you guys over and over again just to make sure that you know it, you get it, you understand it. But in 1863, the tide really starts to shift in favor of the Union, and mostly because the Union is just going to have a larger force that they can throw at the South. The population is so much higher within the North. They're going to have so many more people and so many more men that they can use in the military, and also just because of the industrial capability of the North and the ability for them to send in more weapons and for them to create such a advantage because of that industry and for them to continue to operate, for them to continue to trade, because keep in mind there's a Union blockade happening within the South as well on these northern and southern shores. So there's no foreign goods that are coming into the South, and they really depend upon those foreign. Also, Grant is gaining a lot of ground in the Western Theater as well. So though they may be winning the Confederacy in the East, in the West, Grant is just wreaking havoc because he has so many men available to him to just throw at these Confederate forces. He seized the northern portion of the Mississippi River. New Orleans is owned by the Union at this point, so access to the Mississippi is very limited, though the Confederacy can still use the middle portion of it to transport goods and people if they need to, but that is going to change later on in the war. So, what is going to be some of the primary causes or reasons, for the Union to win this war? First off, the Union is committed to what's called total war. Essentially, they're shifting their entire economy and all resources to winning this war. You'll see that in World War I and World War II, World War II especially. In order to win a war, you have to dedicate a large portion of your resources to that. So you'll have factories that previously made t-shirts or pants or whatever to making military uniforms. You'll see factories that were creating goods that you would use at home. They're now making bullets, or they're making weapons that can be used for that war. Also, why is this war taking so long? Well, once again, just to hit on it, excellent Southern generals, the ability to lead their men however it is they need to, and also because of the improved industrial weaponry. This is a different kind of war than all previous wars have been, and that's why you'll see such a tremendous loss of life during the Civil War as well. Just to touch on some of those innovations that occur and are used during this war. Long-range artillery, things that can be used almost miles away to decimate troops or to attack enemy positions from a distance. Also, the bullets that are being used are much more accurate, and they're soft lead, so once you get hit with one, it's actually less likely that you're going to survive, because this bullet, when it enters into your body, it's going to shatter into little bits and pieces and ricochet all throughout your body. So though you may have been shot in a place that typically wouldn't have been very lethal, because of the way that this bullet is is designed, it's going to inflict lethal injuries. You'll bleed out very quickly. It leads to infections very quickly. You also have the first use of the Gatling gun, the first machine gun, which can fire bullets at a rapid rate in quick succession. You'll also see the use of what are called ironclad ships. These are precursors to the battleships that are used later on in World War I and World War II. These are heavily reinforced ships that can really take a beating. But also, because of the high casualty rates, there's a lot of old ways to fight wars that are used during the Civil War. These old formations, these frontal assaults, lining up and firing at the enemy, that's just not the way that wars should have been fought at this point. But because this is the way that it has been fought for such a long period of time, you're going to see large amounts of people that are killed during these battles. And a lot of these pictures here are actually taken at following the Battle of Gettysburg, but you can just see the amount of life lost through these images, and it's just a huge, huge, huge amount of people that are injured and killed during these battles and during this war. Just showing some of the death counts here. The Civil War compared to World War II, World War I, Vietnam. If you combine all of these, it really still doesn't measure up to the amount of lives lost during the American Civil War. Why is the Confederacy having difficulty continuing to fight? Well, because of the emancipation, Britain and France are not joining up like they need them to. The blockade is starving the South. The Anaconda Plan is working like it's supposed to. And also just because the Southern economy, or the Confederate economy, is being wrecked because of inflation. So, Gettysburg. Why is that significant? Well, after Chancellorsville, Robert E. Lee is going to kind of get a boost in morale, and he's going to invade into the North. And Lee's intention is to actually go up into Pennsylvania, attack Gettysburg, and just wreck the Union morale. He wants the Union to really feel hurt by this battle so that they will back out of the war, because he understands that if he can really hurt the morale, the ability or the desire for the North to continue to fight against the Confederacy, that they can win this war. However, that does not end up happening. Robert E. Lee and his troops, though there is a tremendous loss of life on both sides, Robert E. Lee and his troops, the Confederacy, ends up losing this battle. Lee is stopped, and the Confederacy will actually never enter into the North again and attack it. And as a result of the Battle of Gettysburg, the North, the Union, is going to start to win this war. But once again, just to hit on it, because that is significant, there is such a huge loss of life in the Battle of Gettysburg on both sides. But the Union, again, has more men that they can throw at the Confederacy. Last battle to talk about, and I'll have to separate this into another video, the Battle of Vicksburg. And what Vicksburg is significant for is this seizes the entire Mississippi River. Grant has seized the northern portion, the Navy has seized the southern portion, and so this is going to cut off Confederate control of the entire Mississippi River. So Grant has cut the South really in half, and the Anaconda Plan has been successful. They have seized the Mississippi River, and from this point, they're going to start squeezing the Confederacy and moving eastward. And you're going to see people like Sherman really move into places like Georgia and South Carolina and seize the rest of the Confederacy. So I'll have to split this up once again. I'll talk about the Gettysburg Address and the end of the war at Appomattox in the next video.